What's up, legends, and welcome back to another Unmatched the Witcher first impressions video. Today we are taking a look at the ancient Leshen, or as I like to call him, give him a little beret, a mustache, and call him Leshen. But the Leshen is from the Steel and Silver Unmatched the Witcher set. And both of them, the other one being Realm's Fall, are available now to order from the link at the top of my description at the Restoration Games website. There is a bundle going on right now. You can get some cool foil cards, get a mini of Geralt in a bathtub with his dogs out. So yeah, with all of that out of the way, let's get into my first impressions of this character. We're going to start by asking the question, what makes a monster something so scary that you feel more comfortable running away than engaging with it? The two monsters I want to compare to the Leshen from Unmatched so far are the T-Rex and Dracula. The T-Rex being this big behemoth of a fighter that pressures you with really scary attacks and just constant card draw. So even though the T-Rex herself is pretty slow, she charges at you full force, hits you with everything she has, and just kind of dares you to survive. Whereas Dracula takes kind of the opposite approach. He's more methodical. He plots, he sits back, he schemes, he relies on his sidekicks to do some of his bidding, pun intended, and ends up killing you with calculated blows at the end with just one big beast form that you have no hope of blocking. And I compare both of these characters to the Leshen because the Leshen, I feel, has elements of both of these characters, but in my opinion, from like a competitive standpoint, it doesn't work together in this package. So I'm pretty pessimistic about this character, but I would love to be proven wrong just because there are some really neat and intricate things going on. Let's take a look at the character card and ability. The thing I want to point out here is, yes, the Leshen is move 1. The only other character in the game with that low of a move value is the T-Rex, but the T-Rex has pretty high boost values to be able to consistently maneuver around and sort of pseudo range with her Miss Marvel ability to be able to attack from one space away. The Leshen is just actually ranged, which I would say is probably not as good as the T-Rex kind of package, just because depending on the map and the zone layout, having to boost everywhere can get problematic because you don't have the best values. The ability is one thing I want to focus on for the Leshen because the Leshen's ability is Heart of the Forest. Add +3 to the value of the Leshen's attacks. If it already attacked this turn, your wolves have a move value of 3. So it's really good that they're giving the wolves, which you have 2 of and can recur, a move value of 3 so that they are a little bit more flexible to move around the board. And you get to use the positioning of your sidekicks to your advantage, which you will need to do in order to win, I believe. And the +3 to your attack is just crazy good. It's crazy. There's nothing quite like it in the game right now. Just a free floating +3. The caveat is that the Leshen has to attack, and the +3 triggers on the second attack or subsequent attacks if you find a way to gain actions like through potentially an Achilles heel or something like that. That's a really bad idea for Achilles. So this ability is really scary, but it comes with the trade-off that you have to attack at least twice with the Leshen specifically, and that can get a little bit tricky because your opponent probably is not going to give you just free double attack turns. If they are, they're just going to end up in an early grave. And characters with after combat movement can really mess you up because you can attack them first, and then if they like have a skirmish or a toil in danger or something like that, and they are able to move out of your zone, you're kind of SOL because you can't attack them again. And I think the Leshen has to get its ability off in order to win, otherwise you just don't have enough damage. And if you get into a pattern of only attacking once a turn, you're just going to get completely outvalued in a long game. I think you need to be able to hit double attacks, and I just think that is a little bit more difficult than meets the eyes. The first big thing I want to talk about the Leshen is its vulnerability, because yes, while it is a big monster that can throw out +3s, it also is kind of weak to getting smacked back. And if we take a look at its blocks, everything on the screen you see right now is all the blocks available for the Leshen. There are only 9. Primeval Guardian is a big value block that can totally backfire because your opponent essentially blind boosts their attack, which means if they're kind of baiting you, you're not really going to get punished because you're going to get that discard and they're probably not going to be able to hit over you. But if they are swinging big and or have big boost values in their deck, you can get mega punished. The after combat wolf movement is really nice for setting up some of your other cards, and can kind of help you get some double attacks in. We'll talk about that more later when we talk about the wolf cards. Typical wily fighting for a ping, but like blocking for 3 when you have 13 health isn't really the most remarkable thing in the world, but hopefully clearing some sidekicks out might be nice for this hero. And we have Planted Feet, which is essentially an exploit, except against opponents that can reposition you, like Tesla with remote control, Arthur with Command the Storms, Leonardo with Leonardo's ability. This card is really bad, but I think the Leshen needs the card draw, so this is like a really good first action block, and I really don't think you can afford to attack with Wily or Planted Feet just because you just don't have enough alternative blocks to be able to use your versatiles on offense. Speaking of offense, the Leshen does have a pretty scary package because everything with a printed value of 4 or higher is going to be at least a 7 if you are able to get the +3, which is just insane to imagine. Most characters can't take 3 or 4 7s during a game and not just crumple over, so being able to get your ability off is going to be crucial to pumping up your already high value attacks. Flock of Birds is absolutely crucial because after combat you may place the Leshen in any space, which means if you are playing this first action and your opponent blocks with something that gives them after combat movement, you can just chase them with this card, place the Leshen in whatever zone that they ran to, and then hit them again. I think it is criminal that they gave the Leshen only 2 copies of this. You would have loved to see at least 3, but we will take what we can get. Primeval Slam gives you a Wolfpack. Good that you have 3 of them, and then lets you move all the wolves, which is another crucial card for wolf shenanigans. Command the Forest is great, especially with an if you won the combat trigger on an attack that can probably get pumped up. And maintaining hand advantage over your opponent is important for this character, but I find it has a weird tempo game because if you are drawing a bunch of cards and you have the initiative on you, your opponent is just going to retreat and you're going to have to be boosting in and attacking them. Not really efficient with your low move value and your desire to double attack. And I think if your opponent has the initiative and like a pretty big hand advantage, you might just get out aggroed by inconsistent card draw. So really questionable tempo game I have for the Leshen because you want to be sitting back and getting those greedy double attack turns. But at the same time, if you are letting the game run long, you're just going to run out of blocks. And if you try to be really aggressive, I feel like you're just going to run out of resources. One of the reasons why I'm not super high on this character right out of the box. Nature Abounds, I think, is a fantastic card. It is also an any, which means the wolves featured on the art will probably be the ones attacking with it. Although it is a good option to throw out as the Leshen, as everything else the Leshen throws out, you don't really want to cancel because you're just going to take a bunch of damage over the top of the feint. But Nature Abounds is awful into a feint because of its low value. So throwing it from a wolf, actually probably more likely to get feinted. So that might just be kind of like a pseudo Leshen only card. But Nature Bound says after combat, draw 1 card for each of your fighters adjacent to the opposing fighter. So this is, if you throw it from range with Leshen, it's not going to trigger the adjacency, but if you have all 3 of your fighters, it's potentially a draw 3, which I think this character needs in certain scenarios. But I found in most of my games, I wasn't actually adjacent to them with the Leshen when I was attacking with this, which means that you better position your wolves close or surrounding your opponent so that you can get value out of this, but then you weaken their survival chances if your opponent has like AoE or something, which can be scary. So again, a tricky card, and that's just kind of what happens when you have 1 health sidekicks and adjacency requirements. Next, let's take a look at some of the schemes that the Leshen has, and Vanish into Murder is a familiar looking card, and again, this is a card that I wish you had more than 2 copies of. It says, deal 1 damage to each opposing fighter in the Leshen zone, remove the Leshen from the board. At the start of your next turn, place the Leshen in any space, then draw 1 card. This card is literally perfect. It has a ping, an AoE ping for clearing enemy sidekicks, because you just want to sink your big attacks into the hero. You don't really want to deal with a bunch of 1 health sidekicks eating your damage up. So this is a really good way to clear those pesky minions from the board. And then the Leshen gets removed from the board, which means that is a turn your opponent has that they can't attack you. So this is almost like a block card in a way, because you're just running and they can't attack you at all. And then at the start of your next turn, you get to place the Leshen anywhere, which is amazing for setting up a double attack turn. And then you draw a card, so you potentially get to draw into another defense or another attack. I love this card. It's amazing. Probably the best card in your deck. But I will say the one caveat is when you remove the Leshen from the board and your opponent has a turn to kind of just twiddle their thumbs, they're probably going to double maneuver, and they might even play some sort of draw scheme to find good defenses to prepare for your next onslaught turn. And that can be a little bad, just giving your opponent time to regroup, but you are also regrouping at the same time and potentially setting up a very devastating turn. So I think that is a trade-off you have to be willing to make. And Strength of the Pack is the Leshen's ongoing scheme. All of the new characters in the Witcher sets have an ongoing scheme, which is a new mechanic. It is a scheme that has an effect when you play it, and then it has a stagnant effect that remains in play until you fail to meet the condition on the card. So Strength of the Pack says when you play it, summon a wolf in the Leshen zone, and then ongoing, at the start of your turn, the Leshen recovers 1 health. Discard this card at the end of your turn if there are no wolves in the Leshen's zone. So it gives you a wolf when you play it to meet the condition and not immediately lose it on your first turn, because you'll play it, you won't get the healing yet, and at the end of your turn, you have to share a zone with a wolf, otherwise it goes away. So the idea here being that if you protect the wolves, keep them alive, you will slowly heal up the Leshen, which you need as a character with 13 health and 9 defenses. I will say the ongoing schemes do not stack, so you can only have one of these active at a time. And on your opponent's turn, if they defeat all your wolves, this scheme will still be in effect because it checks at the end of your turn, so you'll still get that start of the turn heal. If you have this in play and somehow all your wolves get taken out when it's not your turn, and you have wolf recursion on attack cards, so you can potentially get a wolf back by attacking with one of those cards and still having the scheme in play, which is great. Speaking of wolves, let's look at some of their cards. Disturbing Howls is a sneaky good card, even though it is only a 1 value attack. After combat, you get to move the opposing fighter up to 2 spaces and gain 1 action, which is amazing for being able to reposition enemies to then attack them with the Leshen. This is really good using it first action to kind of move someone into the Leshen zones, then you get 2 actions to attack them, or you can attack with the Leshen, and if the opponent is able to move out of your zone, maybe you have some sort of wolf set up kind of pinning them into an area, or you have an attack that lets you move the wolves, you can use this to then move the wolves back into their zone and hit them again with the Leshen. Harrying Strike is also sneaky good. You might want to use it as a block for the wolves because Wily and Planted are both any's that the wolves can use, but you're probably going to need to use them on the Leshen. So this might be a solid attack, but it is also a really solid block. It has a during combat add +2 to this card's value for each of your fighters adjacent to the opposing fighter. So on defense against melee fighters, this is always going to be a 4 because your opponent is attacking the wolf from adjacent. So the +2 is going to trigger. Oops, sorry, I just hit my desk there. I was gesturing with my hand even though you guys can't see me. And if you have another wolf, or potentially even the Leshen, next to the opposing fighter, this can get to a 6 or even an 8, which is potentially really scary, especially coming from a wolf. But both of these cards are susceptible to feints, which is why I think Nature Abounds is a Leshen attack, because you don't want that card draw getting canceled. So these are all of the Leshen cards. Let's take a little trip down to Magical Optimal Fantasyland and take a look at some sequences that the Leshen would like to see with varying degrees of likelihood. Probably the most easiest one to set up is just playing Vanish into Murder, removing the Leshen from the board, and then at the start of your next turn, plopping down in attack range of the enemy fighter, probably the hero that you want to target, playing Flock of Birds, so that way you can chase them if they move anywhere, and then hitting them with like a printed 4 that is now a 7. And I put Command the Forest on the screen because that has a pretty sick if you won the combat condition. So that's probably the most straightforward one. The other one that I came up with, which is a little bit more complicated, is playing something like blocking with Primeval Guardian, which lets you move wolves, or first action attacking with Primeval Slam, which gives you a wolf and then lets you move the wolves. And then with your wolf movement, you set up a Disturbing Howls attack and either use that first action to move the opposing fighter into the Leshen zone, or second action to move the opposing fighter into the Leshen zone after you play the slam. And then either second action or third action, depending on what your Primeval setup was for Howls, hitting them with just a big attack if it's your last action, or double attacking them as the Leshen. So it kind of requires some setup there, but basically the idea is wolf movement either on defense or first action into Disturbing Howls to move the opponent closer to you if they were able to get away somehow, and then kind of finishing out your second attack or double attacking them. And this would also be a pretty good place to throw out the Flock of Birds, but I put some of the adjacency requirements in here like Nature Abounds and Harrying Strike, just because with the wolves and the wolf movement you can probably set that up a little bit easier. So I talked about Philippa's strengths and weaknesses. Let's just quickly showcase some of the Leshen's strength, and it's just this portion of the ability card, the fact that it is ranged and its ability. I feel like almost everything else about this character, it comes with drawbacks that outweigh the strength, if you will. Some of these gripes kind of compound a little bit. So the Leshen only has 9 hero blocks, and it has unideal card draw. The unideal card draw makes it harder to find the blocks if you don't have any. Like the last Magical Fantasyland sequence I just showed, there are kind of turns where you'll play a bunch of cards, and they have to be kind of specific cards. And so that's why I put like bursty or coordinated pattern of using cards, which means you need to use like 3 or 4 cards all together on the same turn, which can be pretty inconsistent to find because you have unideal card draw. Move 1 stinks, but at least your range, but you also don't really have the best boost values, and you have a reliance on 1 HP sidekicks, which is just like a general weakness, I think, because 1 HP sidekicks are pretty easy to kill, and if you want to use your good blocks on keeping the wolves alive, you won't have those blocks available for the Leshen. And if you're using harrying as a block for the wolves, that's just less offensive output that you have to rely more on the Leshen's ability to get, which can be kind of hard to maintain. There are also no cancels in this deck, which is just like a pretty big weakness in and of itself. And like I said, the pace of play that you have is kind of tricky because you can't really play that fast because of your card draw, but the slower you play, the more time the opponent has to just whittle away your defenses, and you have to hope that your opponent is in a more like mid-range scenario where they're not gonna like aggro burst you down before you can just see cards, and they're not super control-y like Sherlock where they can just afford to run away the whole game and then end up killing you anyways. I think this character is going to be really good at dealing with mid-range characters who lack after combat movement, but I really think that is his main downfall. You can't really count this character out. Like, he's not terrible because he has a +3 ability, which sometimes you can just steal games that you had no business being in. But I feel like he is going to be fighting tooth and nail for the games that should be even matchups, just because of the unideal conditions thrust upon him by having such a good ability. So those are my thoughts on this character. Hopefully I was able to elaborate efficiently why I have doubts about him, but I would love to know your thoughts and how the Leshen has been in your early plays of the Witcher sets. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I will be back with more of these first impressions videos after PAX Unplugged in Philadelphia this weekend, which I will be attending and doing events and learn to plays for Restoration. Please say hi if you see me, and until then, I'll catch you guys around. So thank you so much for watching, and as always, like, subscribe, and yeet!